Hey guys, King Shadow Omega back again for another rant and tangent. And today, well, first off, let me just explain. Clearly, you can probably hear me a lot better, and that's because I was a moron when I set up my webcam, and all this time I thought the volume was coming, the microphone rather, was being used from the webcam. So I turned off my other microphone, which happens to be a piece of shit. So, yeah, this thing, no more. It's gone. Now we'll be able to actually hear me instead of having to max out your volume and then you go to another video and your ears will be blown apart. So that's good. I'm not going to go back and change my previous videos. I think that I don't think people should do that unless they were just that awful. And I think overall they were good videos. So, and I don't think I'll ever get the same charm from redoing them. So don't worry now. It's going through the right microphone and you can hear me. Anyway, so today's rant is about Zelda 2. Not bad, but great. And I've really been meaning to talk about this. Zelda 2 is an amazing game. I really feel that we just love to shit on it because it's different. Like, oh, it's the black sheep, so no one's got to like it. No, Zelda 2 is fucking amazing. Alright, and I'm going to explain why. And what, may I ask, is wrong with black sheep? Some black sheep are awesome. Remember Buddy? Buddy was awesome. He's like the black sheep of his group. And think of the black sheep as a shiny Pokemon. Charizard's a shiny Pokemon. He's black, yeah. Just think of a black sheep like that. Actually, you know what? No, I don't really have to explain why. I'm going to explain why it's not shit like everyone seems to have this hallucination in their minds that tells them it is. Let me get just right down to the bare-knuckle reasoning of the problem. Zelda 2 is hard. And when I say hard, I mean, I know people who are really good gamers who have never beaten Zelda 2. And that's really what I think comes down to it, because I get into arguments with people about this quite often, quite a bit more than I think I should have to get into arguments with. And their answers are always the same thing. Dude, the game's hard. And then, like, every time they bring it up, they're like, yeah, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that just means the game's hard. And they're like, no, it's because of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so the game's hard. And that's always what it comes down to in the end, that the game is hard. Like, yeah, and it is hard. Don't get me wrong, the game is hard. But, like, people are like, oh, in the first game you could walk around, it's a top-down view. I'm like, all right, well, that's a sort of preference. That doesn't mean the game's bad. Besides, there's a top-down view. Here, right here. See? Top-down. At all. And they're like, yeah, but the controls aren't that good. And I'm like, to which I say, well, that's actually way wrong. Controls are fluid as hell. I mean, you have a shield in front of you at all times. So up or down will make you block as long as you're not attacking. 1. So that's a mechanic right there. 2, there's a bit of a slide mechanic in the sense that if you jump, you'll slide a little bit. So there's momentum and physics already built into the game that are quite responsive. You have jump attacks. I mean, and that's before, and I'm not even talking about jump attacks before you get the downward thrust or the upward thrust. I'm just talking about basic, like the one where he goes like see, like this. Yeah, jump attacks. See, that's physics. You know what I'm talking about. That part where he like goes huh or whatever. And the enemies are strategic with their own shields sometimes to block your attacks. I mean, the game is really, really good. And I think that's what people, like, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, no, the mechanics aren't that good. No, it is. The game's done well. Okay? But it always comes down to, it's like, yeah, but the enemies can hit you easier. I'm like, so it's hard? Like, that's my point. Like, every argument always boils down to somebody giving me a reason that basically just explains that the game is difficult. So then, some people argue, well, the towns are lame. Okay, so maybe air is kind of lame. But although air is actually required in the storyline, and most people, because they haven't gotten that far into the game, don't even know that. Air actually tells you about a secret tunnel to the King's Tomb. So air is not useless, actually. It's just famous because, you know, no one is good and they couldn't beat the game. Well, actually, they're the first time towns were used in a Zelda game. Let me erase that. That's wrong. But there was way more people in Zelda 2 than there were in Zelda 1. Like, the towns are actually not a problem. Like, oh, well, the loading screens between areas. Alright, well, it's the regular Nintendo game. Like, there are loading times all the time in all games. So to say that that's not a fluid translation is just dumb. Now, I will say the loading screens actually prevented the game from being what Shigeru Miyamoto had intended it for. Out of all the Zelda games, this is the one that he feels was not what he had envisioned. It wasn't what he envisioned, let me rephrase that. He said he's never made a bad Zelda game. That's how he starts off the question. And, of course, websites like IGN and etc., etc., etc. are all about saying, well, they list the title of that interview as Miyamoto reveals worst game, or Miyamoto's worst Zelda game. And it's like, he never says that it's his worst. He just says, in the interview, he says that game was the one that he wished they could have done some other stuff with. And he wasn't able to because of the limitations of the NES hardware. That doesn't make it a bad game. It's a classic. And to be honest, I know people who like it better than the original Zelda. And it's no one's favorite Zelda by any means, but that doesn't mean it's the worst Zelda. As far as I'm concerned, that honor belongs to Phantom Hourglass. That game is bad. And to be clear, when I say bad, I'm not including the 3 CDI games, because they aren't Zelda games. Those abysmal pieces of shit would have completely taken back every positive thing Zelda ever did if we ever considered them Zelda games. They're that bad. Okay, it's not bad. It's a Zelda game, so it's still good. But I really feel Phantom Hourglass is probably one of the weakest. I think I have it right here, actually. Yeah, Phantom Hourglass. Damn. There you go. Phantom Hourglass. Sorry, it was all that glare. It's not a bad game. I clearly own it, and I've beaten it. I mean, but it's just comparatively, and I think actually that's in the binder. I can't grab it, but 4 Swords for the Game Boy. That was lacking. I mean, it's not to say that any of the games are bad per se. It's just some of them are clearly not people's favorites. Another one that gets a lot of hate, Wind Waker, or rather, it used to get a lot of hate. Now it's like the hipster thing to like love it. It's like, no, it's trendy to love Wind Waker. And it's like, but everyone hated it. I remember when it was debuting in, 2002 at the game show? Or maybe it was 01. I don't remember if it was 01 or 02 where they had that awesome, mature Link Ganondorf fight. And then we got Wind Waker, and we're like, wait, what? But Wind Waker was amazing. I love Wind Waker. Now, it's gotten better. I mean, clearly they made the re-release that they fixed a lot of the small tweaks that that held the game back in many ways. But the game is a classic, and it's and a lot of people's favorite Zelda title. Yeah, see, we could have got this, but instead we got this, which turned out to be amazing. So I guess that turned out better. Some people hate Majora's Mask and say that's one of the worst. And for all fairness, in that one, I understand because it's the repetitiveness of the day cycles of having to go and do the same thing over and over. And for that much, I get it. All right, yeah, I can understand their point. But the game is amazing, groundbreaking in many ways. I loved Majora's Mask. It's a great game. And it's some people's favorite Zelda title. Again, so I mean, it's all about perspective on how it's still. I'm sorry, I tangented again. Zelda 2 is not a bad game at all. So what's other complaints? People are like, oh, well, if you take damage, you get flying back. Yes, so what? This is the NES, remember? That happens in, like, every game. You want to talk about games that happens in? Alright, we can talk about all of them. Mega Man, Castlevania, or these bad games too? Because they're not. They're amazing games. And it's not just them. Look, Chip and Dale's a great game. There's plenty of games like this. Castlevania is notorious for how difficult it is, but it's not even the worst. Legend of Zelda 2 is not so bad because look at this. Ninja Gaiden is the worst, and it's because half of the game is pits. At least Zelda doesn't have that many pits. I mean, just look at how often you'll die in this game. That happens. Get over yourselves. Again, that comes down to, oh, boy, it's cheap deaths. Cheap deaths? This is the NES. That happens. A lot. So, again, it comes down to be difficult. Less about game mechanic choices, because great games have had that. And that doesn't change anything. So then there's arguments about, I think the biggest argument I hear is people saying, well, because it's, if you die in a temple, you have to go all the way back. To which I say, Meet the angry video game nerd. There are thousands of games he's reviewed where shit like this happens. I don't think it's that big of a trend. It happens. Alright, yeah, that does suck. I'm not gonna lie. I really dislike that as well. But there are extra lives spread out through the world. The game is all about difficulty. That's a difficulty aspect. Yeah, it sucks that you have to do that, but it doesn't really... I've never lost a life. Well, I have if I've been an idiot, or if I purposely wanted to level up and got myself screwed like an idiot. It's different. But normally, if I get knocked back from a temple, I can make it back to the temple without losing the life. And normally, by using the life spell, I'll be pretty good. Which brings me to another point. The spells. This is the first game that you actually use spells. Now, in later games, you don't really use spells at all. I mean, there are a couple of them. I mean, well, actually, we use the word use, so no, there aren't any, actually, that you use spells. Because Ocarina of Time, yeah, you use spells, but I don't ever remember using any of the spells, maybe for Roar's Wind. That's probably it. I don't think I ever used Nayru's Love or Din's Fire. Ever. Hell, I've used Din's Fire, Nayru's Love, and Roar's Wind more in Smash Brothers than I've ever used them in Ocarina of Time. Like, ever. And I've played Ocarina of Time a lot. I just never used them. I honestly think I'd have never used them more than once or twice. Except for Roar's Wind. I've used that one a few times. But even then, only a few times. Like, the novelty wears off after like 9 seconds, so you don't even use it after that. So yeah, there's magic in the game. I mean, okay, some of the magic's useless. The spell, or secret, whatever it's called, magic, that opens up a temple. Alright, well, and you wouldn't know that, but you have to read. Like, it doesn't require Nintendo power. It helps to have Nintendo power, but it's not required. So, the fact that you use that spell to open one of the temples, alright, that's the only use for it. Okay, so it's useless. The jump spell, minus like one spot in the game, and a couple spots that I guess it could be useful. Again, useless. You don't need it after that, ever. The fairy spell can be useful, although it is a bit cheap because you need the experience, so skipping through an area isn't always the best idea. But regardless of which, some of the other spells, the Thunder spell just costs too damn much, but it's still a damn strong-ass spell. It's a fucking screen wipe, and you have to use it on the final boss. Final boss. The 8th boss. I'm sorry, 7 temples? It's 7 temples. The final temple's boss, as opposed to the game's boss. Right before boss. So, you have to use it on him. And so other than those spells, though, I mean, you got the other ones that are actually really useful. You got, like, the fire spell, which I find useful. You have the shield spell, which is fucking amazingly important throughout the entire course of the game. That spell is super important. Then there's the life spell, which is arguably more important than the shield spell. Like, it's super duper useful. These spells are like the first time we actually see something like that. And then, of course, there's the level up system that people don't often rip. Some people just don't like the grinding aspect of the game. And that much I can agree with as well. You do have to grind. But so what? The game's long. A lot of games are long. Dragon Warrior and that's what we knew it as, Dragon Warrior. It's clearly the Dragon Quest series. But Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy were both long. I mean, Dragon Warrior 2 and 3 were super long, and so was 4. But 1 was a bit more basic in its sense. Final Fantasy, that was long. A lot of games were long. That doesn't mean that they're bad. That doesn't mean having a game long. I mean, you have to grind in these games. It was a different take. And some people are like, oh, okay, you don't have patience? That's fine. You don't have to. But it's rewarding. That's the one thing I will say about Zelda 2. It is certainly the most rewarding of the series. And part of that is the difficulty, yes. And, I mean, it's clearly the most difficult Zelda game. You could argue Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, the second mode, you could argue that. Yeah, that's pretty freaking hard, too. Because the Dark Nuts and the like start to really piss you off. But I still don't think... I've beaten both of those multiple times. And I've beaten Zelda 2, but I don't know anyone of my friends who have beaten Zelda 2. I know a lot of them that beat Zelda 1 second mode. And all it really does is add more enemies, you take more damage and stuff, but Zelda 2 is difficult in its own. The other thing a lot of people have complaints with is you don't know where to go. Really? Because if you talk to people, you can figure out where to go. There's a bit of exploration. Yeah, I'm sorry that you can't go into game facts right off the top back then and find out where to go. That doesn't mean the game's bad. The game's still good. Like, people complain about, oh, well, how would you know about the one temple that rises up? Well, I don't know. Maybe because you talk to people in the game that tell you where it is. That's not that hard. I mean, how would you know about the burning bush in the first Zelda game? How would you know about the lost woods in the first Zelda game? It's the same thing. It's no different. And how would you know about the grave in whatever Zelda 2? I mean, there's lots of parts that are difficult. But Zelda 2 in and of itself is just a very great game. And by the way, I'm comparing it to Zelda 1 because that's what most people often compare it to. I'm not saying Zelda 1's a bad game by any means. I love Zelda 1. And all things considered, I would say Zelda 1 is a better game than Zelda 2. But that doesn't mean Zelda 2 is a bad game. That everybody always tries to make it. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Zelda 2 is a fantastic game. In Zelda 2, it's the first time that we see Link's downward thrust. I mean, it's the first time. We never see the downward thrust, or the upward thrust for that matter. We don't see them until this game. And the downward thrust becomes a signature move of Link's afterwards. We see it a lot in now in the newer Zelda games, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. We see the downward thrust used as a finishing move, and of course it's in the fighting games, the Smash Brothers games, and of course Soul Calibur 2. It's probably Link's best move. This move is amazing. It just makes the game so much easier, and it's still really hard. But, I mean, these moves, the Swordmaster techniques, the downward thrust was amazing. Okay, it's one of the best moves in the game. I don't care what anybody says. And the game was enjoyable. Like, I'll be honest, I never got a more rewarding feeling from a Zelda game as I did through Zelda 2. Death Mountain, anyone who knows me, anyone who knows Zelda 2, if you play through Death Mountain, if you get through Death Mountain, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That is one of the most difficult sections of the game, but once you pass that section, you feel so rewarded after having played through it. And I can't stress that enough. The game is great, and I find that all the complaints against the game are really all about its difficulty. I mean, and okay, yeah, there's a bit of a letdown for how easy Dark Link or Shadow Link, whatever you like to refer to him as, is how easy he is if you know the trick. But the thing is, if you don't know the trick, I don't know many people who've ever beaten him the real way. I know people who have just gone to the corner, crouched, and jabbed over and over again. But I've never beaten him. I don't know if I've ever beaten him, actually. Oh, shit. Now I gotta go make a run through the game. Damn. I don't think I've ever beaten him otherwise. Like, he's hard. Like, unless you know that trick, you will not beat him. Maybe you will. Actually, tell me in the comments, guys. Have you beaten Dark Link without that trick? Can you? Maybe you can't. I don't know. Okay, I went and checked online. Yes, you can beat him the real way. It just takes for fucking ever. Generally, you have to catch him on his jump up past you. On like his legs. It takes forever. Just do it the cheap way. In any case, guys, I just wanted to do a quick rant, and now I'm done. It's not so much that I love Zelda 2. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably right in the middle of the road, but Zelda 2 is a great game. And I feel it just gets shit on over and over again. Oh, it's a bad game, it's a bad game. It's not a bad game. Like, every excuse people say, other games that are considered great by gamers do. Like, they're sins that are committed by other great games. So, I've never really heard a good reason for it to be a bad game. Simple as that. Yeah, you could say for this reason or for that reason, but the fact comes down to it, it's always just about the difficulty in the end. And difficult games aren't bad games. I mean, clearly there's a market for that. Have you guys ever played Demon Souls or Dark Souls 2? Yeah, those are hard. People love those games. So clearly there is a market for it. So, in any case, guys, I hope you liked that. Like, comment, subscribe, please. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on maybe you don't like Zelda 2. Maybe you just wanted to hear what I was talking about. Or maybe you do love Zelda 2. Please let me know. All right, guys. I'll catch you again for another rant and tangent. And it's been great.